Now this is the lovely Josie blouse we're going to be making today. Now for the Josie top, here we have the front and back top piece that we're cutting on fold. So here we have the neckline up against the fold of the fabric, and what we're going to do with this piece here is we're going to cut it out on fold twice, and we're going to do that for the front and the back. They're the exact same size for both the front and the back pieces. So here I folded the fabric over and placed our pattern on top. I'm now going to pin the pattern in place, and then I'm going to cut it out, and we're going to do the very same for the back piece. And because this fabric is striped, you just want to make sure when you're placing your pattern on top of your fabric that the fabric stripes are going the way that you want them to be. So for example, I want my stripes to be vertical, so they're going down. Now here I'm just pinning my pattern to my fabric all the way around, and I have the top of the pattern on the folded edge, and then I'm going to cut all the way around. And then we're going to do the very same for our back top piece. I folded the fabric in half again, and I'm going to be pinning our pattern to the fabric and cutting it out all the way around. Now, so here we have our second top piece cut out. So now we have both the front and back pieces, and we're going to put them to the side, and now we're going to cut out our bow tie for the collar. Now, so for our collar tie, what we're going to do is cut this out on fold twice, and then we're going to be stitching them together. So I have the skinnier side is the one that's the folded edge. So I have that on top of the folded edge of fabric, and then I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to cut out again on the folded edge. So I will probably just flip it over and try cut out both pieces with this section of fabric. So I'm going to pin this in place now and then start cutting it out. As you can see, I'm just pinning our tie pattern to our fabric now, and I'm making sure that the fabric where the vertical stripes are going straight down, and then just cutting it all the way around, and I'm cutting this out twice. Now I'm just unpinning our pattern from our fabric, and then we can open up the tie to be 2 long ties. Now, so here we have both our front and back top pieces cut out. So as you can see, we have the folded edge here at the top, and when it comes to sewing, what we're going to do is flip it around to make sure that the 2 good sides of fabric are facing each other. And then another important thing to do when we are cutting out our front and back top pieces is to put our notches in here at the neckline as to where we're going to add the piece of elastic. So you'll look at your pattern and you'll have 2 notches here at either side of the neckline. So you're going to line up your pattern again and just make sure you've cut your notches in place. Only very small kind of notches just to show. Here you can see on our neckline, on one side I've made the notches, and then on the other side I've made the very same notches. So that's just going to be our guide as to where we are going to be adding our elastic at the neckline, and we're going to do the very same to the back piece. So here we have our back piece. Make sure both sides are lined up evenly. I'm going to place our pattern on top, and I'm just going to cut in my knot there, tiny half centimeter less than. And this is just going to show us exactly where we want to end the elastic at the neckline. So now we have all of our pattern pieces cut out. We have our 2 front and back top pieces, and then we have our 2 ties for our bow at the neckline cut out on fold, and we're going to place these on top of each other and sew them together with the good sides of fabric facing each other, and then turn it inside out. And then we're going to do the very same for here. So we're going to be sewing, pinning all the way along the side, all the way around, down here, and sewing, except, very important, we're going to leave this gap open here at the sides, because both of those gaps are going to stay open until we feed in our elastic at the neckline. But I will show you it all in our sewing tutorial. Now, so here we have all of our pattern pieces cut out. We have our 2 collar ties cut out on fold, and then we have our front top piece here cut out on fold, and the folded edge is at the neckline, like that. And we've also made our notches here on the neckline to show where we're going to sew an inch long line at the top here and here, and that's where our elastic is going to feed through. And then we've done the very same for our second top piece, and our notches are also here at the side. So we're going to be sewing a straight line all the way across until the other side of the notch, and same for the second notch, and that's where we're going to feed our elastic through at the neckline. And there we go. So this isn't cut on the folded out as well. So yeah, they are our 4 pattern pieces all together, and they're all cut on fold. And the fold piece for the collar tie is at the skinny edge. Now, so for our Josie blouse, the very first step that we're going to do is pin our collar tie pieces together and sew them. So we're just going to line them up at the edges, and we're only going to sew all the way along the sides, and we're going to leave the bottom section open here at the top so that we can turn it inside out. So I'm just going to start pinning here from the side, and depending on your fabric, you just want to make sure that the 2 good sides of fabric are facing each other. For instance, this fabric is the same front and back, so I'm going to pin them together like this from the side, line them up evenly at the corners, and then we're just going to continue pinning all the way down. We're going to do this for both sides. As I said, I'm just pinning our 2 pieces of fabric for our tie together all the way along the side, making sure that the 2 good sides of fabric are facing each other and pinning directly down either side. Now that we have pinned our 2 sides together of our collar tie, I'm now going to sew all the way down both sides, and I'm going to leave about 0.5 centimetre to 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm going to leave the open edge here at the top open. I'm not going to sew across. Now, once we've sewn our 2 edges of our tie fabric together, we're now going to turn it inside out. So I'm just going to place a safety pin at the top of our tie, and I'm going to turn it inwards down through the hole we left at the top and ruche the safety pin all the way down through the fabric. Now, after I turned my collar tie inside out, I then pressed it in place, and what I've done then at the edge is fold up the raw edges and then press them in place. So you can see here I folded up our 2 raw edges and pressed them in place, and now what I'm going to do is sew this hem in place, and then I'm going to top stitch all along the side and all along this side once, now that I have pressed it in place. Now here you can see I've just sewn that bottom hem in place, so that's a nice and neat finish at the bottom of our tie, and I've done the very same on this side. And now I'm going to put this to one side, and we're going to move on to our top and back piece. Now, so here we have our front to top piece, and we have lined them up exactly on top of each other. And you can see here at the collar we have 2 very small incisions, and this is going to show us where we are going to leave a line for. Now, so here we have our front to top piece, and what we want to do here is make our ruching at the front collar. So the way to do this is going to be to, because this is double-sided, is to add elastic through here. We're going to sew a line from here to here and from here to here, and then we're going to feed in the elastic, and then that's going to create that ruched effect. And how we know where to put this elastic is because based off our pattern there was 2 lines on the collar, and that's to show you where that elastic is going to go. So I've made 2 incisions here, as you can see, so you're going to make sure they're lined up, and that's where the elastic is going to feed through. But before we feed it through, we need to sew a straight line from here to here, and from here to here. However, first of all, we're gonna take our top piece. We're gonna make sure that the two good sides of our fabric are facing each other. So I'm gonna fold this over, make sure again that my two incisions here at the side are lined up again. So once they're lined up, I'll just pin this in place, and then I'll do the same on this side. Make sure our two notches are lined up. Perfect. So to ensure that I'm gonna sew a straight line directly from the two notches, what I'm gonna do is just pin this elastic in place, and this is gonna be my guide for sewing the line. So I'm just gonna make sure that this is perfectly straight, and then I'm going to use this as my guide to create that gap in which we're going to feed the elastic through. So for the minute, I'm just going to pin this in place just so that we have it. Now, so once the two good sides of our fabric are facing each other, what we're going to do is line up our top piece exactly all the way along the sides. So I'm just making sure these line up here, and then I'm going to pin all the way from here all the way down to here, and the same on this side, pinning all the way down. Now there's one very important thing to note. This section here needs to be left open, because this is where we are going to be feeding our elastic through to make that ruche detailing at the neckline. So to make a little note for myself, I am literally just going to pin this here, just so I definitely don't sew it over. I'll do the same on this side, and I know to do it exactly here because I made those notches according to our pattern. On the top of the collar, there's two notches, and this is showing you the line where your elastic is going to feed through and where you need to sew a straight line across. But we're not going to sew that until we sew the sides and then turn it inside out. So we're going to leave this section here open, and that's just here as a little reminder to not sew over this. But what I'm going to do now is continue pinning from here all the way around, all the way to the bottom, and the same on this side. And then I'm going to sew from here, gap, leave gap, then sew from here all the way around, and then what we'll do is flip it inside out. And then we can sew our line for the collar. Now, so I'm going to start by sewing from here to here, and then I'm going to leave a gap where our elastic is, and then I'm going to sew all the way down the rest of the side. Now that we've sewn both our sides together, what we can do is overlock our hem, and then we can turn it inside out. Now, so here we have our back top piece, and what I'm going to do is turn the fabric around so that my two good sides of fabric are facing each other, and then I will line it up exactly again and pin it in place. And then we are going to sew our sides the very same as the front piece, leaving that gap at the top so that we can add our elastic at the later stage. So I'm just going to pin these evenly at the corners all the way down. So just this section here where we have our two notches, when we're going to sew in the elastic, I'm just going to make sure that I do a pin going in the opposite direction as a reminder to not sew this section closed, because we want to be able to feed the elastic through it. And I'll just continue to pin all the way down the side. Now, so once we turned our top pieces inside out the correct way and pressed them in place, what I've done now is place a piece of elastic, but you can use anything else that you want. Just I've placed this here and pinned it in a perfectly straight line to use as a guide for where I want to sew a straight line across. So here is where my two gaps are either side, the sections that I left open, and I've just placed the piece of elastic directly at either end and made sure that it's a straight line all the way across. And now I'm going to use this as a guide to follow all the way along and sew two straight lines. And then the two straight lines is going to be the gap where I'm going to filter in my shorter piece of elastic and my necktie. And that's going to make the gathered and ruched neckline at the front. So what I'm going to do now is sew the two straight lines, making sure not to sew any of the elastic because I'm just using this as a guide. Now, so there we have our two straight lines sewn in place, and now we're going to do the very same for the other side, for the other top piece. Yeah, so once we've sewn our two sides together, we can turn it the right way. For the moment, I'm just going to sample different lengths of elastic and just see how kind of wide or long I want my elastic to be. So for instance, if my elastic is this long, how scrunched up does it make the neckline appear? So I actually think that might be the perfect length. So what I'm just going to do is take this out, measure it, and make sure that I have two lengths of elastic that are exactly this width. What we're going to do then is we're going to sew the elastic secure to one end of the opening on our collar here. So we're going to sew it to the bottom end of the opening on our collar here. And we're not going to sew it completely shut because we still need to be able to feed through our necktie for the bow. So we're going to just sew the elastic secure to one end of the fabric here and the same end on the other side here. So if I pull this through, I'm going to make sure that I sew this piece of elastic to the bottom edge of fabric here and not the top edge. So just for reference, this length of elastic is 13 centimeters long, or just over 13 and a half centimeters long. Yeah. So I'm literally just going to cut this in half and I'll have enough elastic for the front and back. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to feed it through here. I'm going to do the very same on this side. Which way? Let's go through this way. So there we have our ties all the way through the neckline, and we're just going to tie our bow. This is definitely the kind of top that you need to see on to envisage how it looks, but this is definitely the idea. So there we have our lovely Josie blouse. So this is a first look at our Josie Blouse. Yeah, so for the hem for our top, I have pressed this in place. So it's about 3 centimeters up twice, so 6 centimeters in total. So it's quite a thick hem. So I folded up 3 centimeters, pressed that in place, and then folded it up another 3 centimeters and pressed this in place. And then I've just pinned all the way along, and now I'm going to sew this hem in place. And at the corners, because of the way that our top is angled in the corners, I have just ended up folding in the hem slightly to make it secure, and then I've just pressed this in place so that it looks much neater on the other side. So that's how it looks on the other side, and the same here. So just make sure you fold over to make that kind of triangle formation, because our top does go out like this, and it just makes up the little build-up of hem. So now I'm going to sew this in place, and front and back stitch at the very start. And then I'm just going to sew pretty close to the top edge here, all the way around. Yeah, so there we have our hem all finished, and our Josie blouse is ready. I'm stuck between the name Josie and Verona for this blouse. I like both names, but yeah, that is our top finished, and I hope you enjoyed following along and found it easy enough to understand. And if you made any pictures, I would absolutely love to see them. And here we have the Josie blouse out in the wild.